Hello everybody and welcome back to Financial Trading Basics Part 7, The $1 Million Myth. In this episode what we're going to do is ask and try to answer one simple question. I say try to answer because I don't know. I don't really have any personal, really strong developed arguments for this. But how much is a lot of money? And what we're going to do is we're going to look at large-scale trends over humanity's evolution, about technology, society, awareness, and just kind of assess what I personally think is going to be the outcomes of the COVID pandemic. But even disregarding the COVID stuff, just large-scale trends in economy and society. But I titled it The $1 Million Myth because watch any TV show, any reality game show, and it's always like this: you can win $1 million. And $1 million just isn't a lot of money, not on a personal level. But we're gonna look at a little bit of again personal finance considerations, but more directly we'll be looking at just the large scale trends. So I have up here, what are the large-scale trends of technology and awareness? In one of my language litigation and integration videos, we discussed how the indigenous people of the Chatham Islands in Polynesia accepted guns into their society for a little bit, which is very clearly a useful technology, and then they went back to the old way within their society of having no guns. And so we're just going to ask what technologies I think are going to be developed. The economy, you have to have a really good understanding of history and human psychology to have any real opinions on the economic development. Economy actually is one of the, I would say, more involved than theoretical physics. To actually conduct research in theoretical physics is probably pretty involved, but just understanding economy is, there's just a lot more moving pieces. And it clearly affects everybody. Everyone has a 401k or retirement investment or has a job, or, everyone uses money. So, and we're going to look at briefly discuss ethics and morality. Again, unfortunately, I'm involved in not a bunch, but some lawsuits where I'm suing other people. I frankly, just because of profound incompetence, and then on top of the incompetence, a general lack of ethical understanding at the business level. And again, so it's going to be over the large-scale time frames. So we're going to be discussing 10-year time frames, 50-year time frames, 100 years. 1,000 years, maybe 10,000 years. 10,000 years is probably the most. It's fairly much sticks and stones before that. But then, what are the societal impacts of technology on your day-to-day life, right? Artificial intelligence. What exactly is artificial intelligence? Well, frankly, all it is just profound computation. But a profound amount of computation is going to give people a profound amount of more free time. The initial knee-jerk reaction that people might, I don't think that many people, but a substantial minority is well, what are you going to do with all of your time? Well, again, you're going to develop personality and develop skill sets. Talked about in my the language and litigation series. You're going to develop yourself. And that's a good thing. The value of a currency is just a medium of exchange for objects. And over the large scale, 500 years of a society, the purpose of technology is to give people improved lives. And yeah, so we'll start now. We'll try to estimate how much cash is out there, how much money in real estate is out there, and how much GDP is today and where I think it's going to go into the future. Yeah, let's get started. So the first thing we need to ask is, first of all, what is cash? Well, again, we have not, it's another word, seems very simple, but it's not well defined. So more or less, cash is value. You have an object, you have demand for that object, and you have a way to an exchange for that object. So the way we're going to do our analysis, and again, these numbers are super general, because again, my point is I don't think we know. But I just have basically how much cash exists. And this is probably the broadest definition that I could find online. This is anything invested in a cash or cash equivalent fund, anything in personal accounts. And the numbers I've come across, or in my estimation, is 2 to 10 quadrillion, which is 1,000 trillion. 1 quadrillion is 1,000 trillion, which is 1,000,000 billion. Almost sounds like a joke, right? Jeff Bezos, I think, is the richest man right now. I know, 140 billion. So if you had $1,000,000 billion, so it's quite a few more dollars than Jeff Bezos. But now, how much new cash is produced annually? You have your basis, your foundation, how much new value is added into the ecosystem every single year. And the global GDP was about $80 trillion for 2017. I also have up here how much inventory exists. I mean, like, because I just said you have your products and the current, reserves of inventory for 18 months gives you a good parameter for demand of a society. But I put question marks. I couldn't find any numbers on that. My personal guess is that it's negligible to the real estate value and to cash value. And then the final thing I had is how much real estate value is there? Because cash to me is still more general than real estate. I say, well, real estate's the longest, most blah 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 fucking asset from history. Yeah, but if Earth gets hit by an asteroid and you have a lot of cash, you can probably get to the moon, and your real estate's not going to be worth fucking anything. I don't think that's going to happen. It could. I mean, sure as fuck could, but my point to you is cash is more general than real estate, but value encompasses kind of everything. But the real questions we need to address is how much value exists and how much new value comes into play, and why. But first, one more thing on cash. I wanted to talk about inflation across societies and inflation intra-society. I don't have any data. You can look it up if you want, just inflation-adjusted GDPs for ancient societies. But because population is so much lower and technology is so much farther behind, it's pretty irrelevant to modern-day analysis. But the thing I want to say for inflation intra-society is that's what a central bank can do, right? If you look at Venezuela, the central bank just says, I don't know how many countries there are, probably 200 and some, but literally cash doesn't really exist. It's just, like I said, it's a medium of exchange. You have a central bank that says, hey, here's our national currency. In one of my other finance videos, I covered how they're not backed by any physical goods, which frankly I still don't. A lot of people say, I think having any assessment of history or any sort of backing cash is a bad basis for your modeling. It has to be consumer demand, and it has to be, again, what value exists and what value is added. But a country's central bank will print a bunch of its own currency, but objects are still the same, right? Then you can just take your manufacturing, right? A lot of the United States companies manufacture overseas. It's because the objects are the same, but the labor is just cheaper. And so it depletes your cash less fast. And so that's where inflation comes from within the same society. And now the point that I want to make over the large-scale history thing, like I said, that's relevant for 10, 50, 500 years, maybe even 5,000. But over a profound amount of time, this is all going to reach equilibrium. I mean, we probably will. I mean, people will stay with their, what I call legacy bias. Just you want to be respectful of your family and of your history. I mean, I don't think that's ever going to go away. So I don't think we'll ever not have city-states or countries. But the inefficiencies within the market over like 10,000 year scales will go away because of technology. And that brings me to my last point. What are market events? Just said cash doesn't exist. The real driver is new innovation. When there is a huge jump, when there is artificial intelligence, when there's a math subject to explain artificial intelligence, and when, if you watch my biology videos, the consumer demand, when the consumer is healthier, when the consumer makes more money, all of these figures are going to be dwarfed to a very substantial scale, right? No offense to Jeff Bezos, but he sells shit online. You're going to see new and better engines. You're going to see profoundly better transmission of electricity. You're going to see a tremendous amount of consumer demand for art and innovation in small local businesses and big businesses, because the market in any general sense is not even close to saturated with absolutely fucking anything. You can have 1,000 liquor brands or 1,000 apps or 1,000 this, but we have not reached technological maximums at all. That's what I want to say there, and we'll move on. So now, what are my conjectures about the ethics and the societal progression? I think COVID-19 has exposed the inefficiency of the daily work grind. I have exposed in quotations because I don't think it is COVID-19 that has exposed that. I think people have always been aware that meetings are extremely inefficient. Driving to a building every day is extremely inefficient. Obviously, if you have some meaningful day-to-day role, like a manufacturing thing, or if you deliver something, or you have to manage people directly, but it's very case-by-case basis. There's a ton of meetings where it's just people just socializing. So that's definitely going to go over 10-year time frames, 50-year time frames, 500-year time frames. That's all going to go down substantially. And everyone's kind of aware of that. But I also, formalized language, the research, the proofs that I have demonstrated will formalize contract writing and litigation, and I didn't have it up here, but accounting as well. And accounting, which is tremendous. I'm an inventor. I have a patent, somebody infringes my patent, I take them to court, then we have to have a logical argument. When you formalize a math proof at the language level and provide the logical foundation for language, the contract writing and the stress it puts on the courts is going to be tremendously less, because the contracts will be way clearer, it will be way more enforceable. You'll have, again, subsequently less lawsuits, and you'll be able to have better accounting standards. Yeah. And then, that's really all I wanted to say. I had ethics in society, but for the most part, our society is substantially more ethical than past. But there's always room for improvement. But on the consumer basis, improved health and consumer demand at unprecedented levels because of automation. You have more time, the general economy improves substantially, huge corporations have way more money, small businesses have more business. When everyone can spend more money, and because they're healthier, well, it's going to put less stress on the hospitals, and less stress on taxpayers as well. And then finally, because there's less crime, or because there's going to be less crime because there's less poverty. Talked about that on my language litigation series, but you're going to see a substantial jump or just improvement of people's health. And now we'll probably try to answer, again, it's a super simple analysis, but what actual dollar figure is a lot of money for our society? So now, in conclusion, trying to generate an actual dollar figure. Right now, I found a number for 2019. It says the GDP was $87 trillion. And then so if we just take a number in the middle of our analysis at 5 quadrillion of how much value exists today, and 87 trillion is how much new value is added every year, that comes out to 1.74%. And I have up here, debt is not death. Two things I didn't really talk about because I truly don't think they're that relevant in economic analysis. Is one, debt. If you read history, if you read the Bible, they talk about forgiveness of economic debt once every 7 years. That's just a little history reference, but you can, one, get out of debt, but two, cash doesn't exist, trust does. If you default on something, again, on the large scale societal consideration, defaulting will go down substantially, and two, people won't go into debt to begin with. But that's really all I want to say there. And then for compound interest, like I just don't think you have to have a material event to really have some sort of true, substantial, or meaningful stimulus to GDP. The only other thing that affects GDP is simply population, which will also increase as well. But fun for us, we're actually at a time with a true fundamental technological development. So let's assume the GDP jumps 25% in 10 years, which I think is very, 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 very low. I think that's a ludicrous number on the low end. That gives us a GDP of about $108.75 trillion. And if you assume GDP jumps 250% in 50 years, that gives you, from today's levels, that gives you a GDP of $217.5 trillion in global GDP. And so to rebuild the wealth of $5 quadrillion at $217.5 trillion of GDP, it takes you 23 years of that economic output to build the wealth that exists right now today. And you said, wow, that sounds like a bunch of big numbers. Well, let's flip that argument. Is 23 years a long time on a personal level? Again, we all care about the past and the future a whole bunch, but we care about ourselves the most. And you should. But people pay off mortgages for way longer than 23 years. They pay off student debt for way longer than 23 years. The world can rebuild all of its wealth, and truly, I personally think 23 to 25 years. That is what I think a large number is, in terms of economics. Again, kind of novel analysis there, but even at the 108 trillion at 25% in 10 years, you're still looking at what? It's roughly half, so about 46 to 50 years. Still, probably about half of an individual's life, but on a societal level, that is just not a lot of money at all. And so my point to today is, when you see people saying stuff like a socio-political scenario, there should be no billionaires. Or you say, oh my goodness, look, they did 2 trillion, get on Wall Street bets. All those fucking idiots are like, J-Pow, brr, 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 printing off $2 trillion. $2 trillion is not a fucking lot of money, not even a little bit. But people not killing each other and people having a way to pay their fucking groceries, that does real benefits for society. And so, my point to people who actually watch these videos, print off more money if you need to. Debt's not all of that relevant. Yes, on a personal level it is. Don't go get a bunch of credit cards. But for monetary funds, for central banks, keep your people alive, for fuck's sake. Yeah, I guess that's probably about the end of this episode. Thanks for watching Financial Trading Basics Part 7, The $1 Million Myth.